So yeah, I see what you're saying now. Casaubon was not of the public scholarly mode.
No, I feel like that's a great definition is public scholarship is just not being like Mr. Casaubon.
Yes, yes, negative example there.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. You can have it. You don't even need to
Thank you.
footnote me.
Ah, fantastic. I mean, I'd give you a footnote anyway, just for
Oh, sure,
funsies.
go for it.
What is the most memorable conversation you've had about James Joyce?
It's slightly embarrassing because I'm the one with the English degree and a bunch of other degrees, and my husband was a self-taught student, just didn't have the degree, but knew loads and loads and loads of stuff. And, I would ask, well, is that the Bible or Shakespeare or you? Anyway, he was busy celebrating Bloomsday. This is years ago. And I had to ask him what Bloomsday was, and I had to have it explained to me. I should have known, didn't have a clue.
Ah, why do you feel like you should have known about Bloomsday?
Oh, because I'm the one, with the degree, the pedigree, the paperwork. But he, like you, was the one with a passion for Joyce. And
Mm.
as you well know, lots of other weird things. If you've seen his
Yes.
books, you know.
I feel like that's the best way to get to know a person is look through their
Oh, I
library and be like,
oh, I
interesting.
totally agree with you. Absolutely.
Who is James Joyce?
He's the Jackson Pollock of words.
Wow, what do you mean by that? What makes you say that?
I don't like Jackson Pollock either.
Oh
Um, this is more of a reflection of my not understanding or appreciating
no. Okay.
than a reflection of his writing being really awful. But I really don't like the style. When the only thing that's memorable is the outhouse and steak and kidney pie and like the pub scenes. Yeah, like there was nothing I could connect with or made me feel enlightened.
So do you feel like then books that you enjoy, like they make you feel enlightened or have something to connect to, and that's what Ulysses is missing? Or
Well, obviously with Middlemarch, I'm connecting to it on some visceral level that I didn't get with Ulysses. So
Mhm.
yes, I guess the answer is yes. But if you take a non-literary viewpoint, look at books. I love Jack Reacher. The violence is so satisfying, and it meets some sort of a visceral need that I wouldn't act out on.
Mhm.
If for no
No.
other reason that I probably don't have the strength, but sometimes the need is there, I think.
Mhm.
No, I
Ah,
just my ladder might be against the wrong tree, but I sense an arrogance, a hubris in the writing, as
okay.
if the veil is being deliberately pulled over our eyes and only the select few at the right hand of whatever God get to see in.
To just like get, the choices, all these things that some people it's just this gorgeous religious experience, and some people it's this, terrible, terrible
Yeah.
experience.
But
So
isn't
why would we read that?
but isn't it fascinating that there is such a spectrum of responses? There's not no response. There is response all along the spectrum. And I suspect there's more at either end of the spectrum than in the middle. Whatever. I don't think that happens, at least not with
Yeah.
this particular book.
Like, how much of Ulysses have you read, and what is Ulysses, and why is it that it's it creates such like extreme reactions to it?
Well, that would be the question. Oh, I haven't read very much. I have my book right here.
Oh,
I
very
got
nice.
only got to page 313. Like I've got all the chapters noted
Ah.
and everything. Like I've got my little pieces of paper there. Um, well, you have to put it in context with me as well. A brain injury, a post-concussion syndrome means I simply cannot read as much as I
Mhm.
want. And if I use too much cognitive energy,
Mhm.
I don't have the energy for the tasks of everyday living. So put it in that context. It's it takes a lot of energy. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon, it's Everest.
Wow.
Well, for me, it is anyway. And I
Mhm.
suspect it is for quite a number of people. I think one thing I found not overly encouraging to read it is that a friend of mine from Ireland tried several times to read it, and her response is pretty much the same as mine.
It's good to know that people have, shared experience with it.
Yeah, well, shared inexperience, maybe.
What made you want to read Ulysses? And then what was the moment that clicked when you were like, never mind, I can't stand this, you know?
Well, it's not that yeah, we do have to put it in context. It's not that
Mhm.
I ever really wanted to read Ulysses,
Okay.
but you know, my husband was a fan, and now I've got time and energy for reading. So let's pay homage to my husband. And then
Mhm.
you come along and say, woohoo, let's read Ulysses. So, I jump on the wagon really quickly. I stayed on the wagon. I just didn't read because
Mhm.
I am getting of an age where I do very little that I don't actually want to do. So I wanted to hear what other people in the group said about Ulysses. I wanted to be with those people, but I didn't want to read the book.
I think you really helped me like rethink what the point of a book club is, because clearly it's not always about the book. It very much is about like the discussion. And I think especially in the context of COVID, Ulysses was just a good excuse to see each other at least once a week.
Well, I was thrilled to have been invited as part of the group. You have no idea how thrilled I am to be part of the group. I don't have a large family. Everybody's busy. There's a pandemic. I'm home with my cantankerous cat. I mean, yeah, so book club has been wonderful. I tend to read less in the summer. That's partly why Clarissa was, plus the people
Mhm.
were so aggravating. Um, Part of me, if I live long enough, would like to have a go at Ulysses again, which I hope you find that somewhat redemptive on my part.
Good.
I don't know if I will or not, but
I hope
it's on the list of books that I would like to try again.
so. If you ever feel that slight inkling, let me know. I'll be there if you want.
Oh, thank you. Let's finish Middlemarch first, because
Yeah,
Middlemarch, I'm just
it's so much
love.
fun. It's so much fun. You read any else of Joyce's work? I don't actually know this. No?
No,
Okay, intro. Why do
no.
you think
Well,
not?
I probably have read bits and pieces or excerpts in survey courses. Maybe there was
Mhm.
something in Norton's anthology years and years and years ago, like 50 years ago, but I have never sat down and read Joyce and uh,
Mhm.
either found an affinity or a disaffinity until book club.
Okay. Why do you think that is?
Um, because I really like Victorian literature better.
Nice. I like that.
Yeah,
No, Victorians and the
I mean, there
modernists
are
are.
there are other books that I've enjoyed much more.
Mhm.
And anytime I'm stressed or anxious, I just read trash.
I like
We're
that.
talking Harlequin or Racy or, whatever. But I haven't read any of that in years either.
That could be the one that you could start reading Joyce's letters. That'll be a nice middle ground.
I do like reading letters and diaries and things like that. It satisfies that voyeuristic
Mhm.
intent or
Yeah.
need, I think.
Well, I got my copy of Joyce's letters from you, so you can have it back and read them and be like, oh, oh dear.
Well, I might do that at some point, but I am a chapter ahead in Middlemarch, and I intend to keep on that
Whoa.
trajectory.
Experiences with Joyce. So things like reading them aloud in a group or celebrating Bloomsday, things like that. Have you done any of that?
Bloomsday, yes,
Yes.
because through my husband. So, it became a deal with us.
Oh, what was it? Describe those events to me. Like, what did you
Well,
do?
basically, we would acknowledge it. And I don't have a strong memory of actually cooking an appropriate meal, but I probably did on a few occasions. But at any rate, the longer we were married, the more we kept mentioning it. But I have to tell you, Bloomsday, when we went to the pub here in Edmonton, that was That was wonderful. I was out. I mean, again, put it in the context of the pandemic. I hadn't been anywhere at that point in a year and a half. So that was kind of nice, and being with people, some of whom I knew, and seeing what they ordered. And
Yeah, exactly. And I remember someone made us read, what is that? I think it's from the Lestrygonian section where Bloom kind of like pops into a pub and it's like just all these men eating super disgustingly. And then he's like, no, and he goes and gets his cheese sandwich. But
yes,
I remember
the discussion of the cheese sandwich. It was hilarious.
The cheese sandwich, and someone made us like read out the like gross description of eating while we were at the table, and all of us are like, well, we're done eating now. Kind of ruined our
I wondered what our poor server thought.
Yeah, just declaiming literature and a little fun. Yeah. So there you go. I think good. Well, I'm glad you had a good experience with that, even if his literature.
Oh yeah, no, I didn't have a bad experience with the book. The fact that I am allowed to not like the book, I am even allowed to not read the book, but still be part of the group. I mean, that is hugely important and hugely fun.
I love that. No, I think it's a good, not even rule, but like a good approach to have to book clubs. That sometimes
well,
the
somebody
book
has
sucks.
to have read it.
Yeah, exactly. As long as one or two people have read it, the book club exists. It's fine. Everyone else could be there.
I just like being with bright people who read.
Yeah, it's fun having those.
I don't necessarily have to have read it myself. I don't want to say, but but sitting listening is wonderful. Yeah, I have a question for you. Can we wait till the end, or I can ask?
No, I was about to turn to that spot anyways. So perfect.
How and when did you get introduced to Joyce? And how and why did this passion develop?
Oh, good gracious. Yeah, it's a good thing.
I mean, like, were you 12 and stealing somebody's book, or what? Oh.
My very first introduction to James Joyce was in summer between grade 11 and 12. I got a copy of Ulysses, 100% thinking that it was just a translation of Homer's Odyssey. And I opened it and I was like, Buck Mulligan, like, that's not a Greek name. What the, like, hello? So then I tried reading it. I was desperately fighting word by word, and I think I dropped out like halfway through Calypso. I didn't like Bloom, so I was like, I'm done. And then in grade 12, we read one of the short stories from Dubliners, Evelyn, in class. And I think just because I was upset I think I had my pride hurt by not being able to finish Ulysses. So then I was like, I hate James Joyce. So I just, I don't know, like wrote, like little things about how much Evelyn sucked and I didn't want to read it ever again. And then in my second year of my undergrad, I took it was like narrative theory class or something, but the prof usually, like, his interests were in modernism, so he was teaching us literary theory or narrative theory by reading Woolf and Joyce, and it was one of the most frustrating classes I've ever taken here, and I think that frustration kind of made me be like, it was almost like out of spite that I was like, no, like, we read The Dead, and I was like, I want to understand The Dead, even though this prof isn't really like explaining it to me. But
it made you a better scholar, didn't it?
Oh, it totally did. That's one of those things where it was so frustrating at the time, but looking back, I'm like, he knew what he was like, he must have. But then I remember sort of out of the blue, I can't even remember how I found it, but I was getting ready for the like final exam of that class, and I found this show. It's like interactive theater called The Dead 1904 that takes place every sort of like winter in New York. And it's just sort of because The Dead is like a dinner party, essentially. The characters are all at a dinner party. And so the show was like, you attend the dinner party, but like they're actors like being the characters and that sort of thing. And I just thought, wouldn't it be hilarious to go and like put myself into this world of this author that I hate? And so mostly out of irony, I did that. And then I went to the
You went to
show.
New York.
Yeah. I went to New York and went to the show. And like halfway through the show, I remember being like, oh, like, oh no. And then that was it pretty much. And then I was just like, I need to know what's happening. So then I read Portrait, fell in love with Stephen, and then being able to enter Ulysses through those first 3 chapters with him made it just go. So,
I envy you your passion.
I mean, hey, maybe you just need to be fair. I think, you know, going to New York to like an interactive theater show it's a big thing to have to do to like prod yourself into the interest of it.
Yes,
So
but you had the inclination and the wherewithal to do it. So yay,
that's true.
you.
Yay, now here we are.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I'm kind of that way about my gardening. I'm not going to New York to, you know, see horticultural shows, but you know,
Yeah, it's a
that's
thing you
my
have,
passion, bigger than
Joyce.
reading. Yeah, bigger than well, it doesn't take much, but that's beside the point.
Oh no.
Yeah, no, just never had that aha
Mhm.
moment where everything clicks, but
Mhm.
really liked War and Peace. That I'm really
Yeah.
pleased to have done that.
Joyce is sort of more pulling the like real life events into the abstract, and you know his narrative style sort of hides that from us. So
Mhm.
yeah.
I'm glad you used the word abstract because
Okay.
that is the main word that comes to my mind when talking about Ulysses, which is why I mentioned Jackson Pollock. I mean, just abstract, and I have to work so hard to make something sensible or pleasing from it. It's
Mhm.
if you look at it in terms of a cost benefit analysis, just not worth it for me.
Yeah, no, I think that that's fair enough. Why? I don't know. I don't think any book would be good, but especially not a book with this sort of like reputation, like almost like fencing it off as Ulysses
Mhm.
has. No, I don't think it'd be good to read it just because other people said to, you know?
No, I think a number of books are worthy of trying at least because somebody
Mhm.
recommended. I mean, Ulysses is one of them,
Mhm.
and you know, some of the magical science fiction time travel stuff. People have recommended those to me. I've tried. I don't like those either. If you look at reading from a self-referential, self-analysis, learning about oneself point of view, I mean, you can learn by trying to read various things. I mean, again, a self-referential story. I'm sorry, you reach a certain age, you've got a whole pile of them, but I remember reading Robert Munsch. I can't stand Robert Munsch, but my firstborn child, well, it's just so formulaic. However, my firstborn child loved Robert Munsch and Pigs. I thought he was going to die laughing when I read Pigs to him. You must remember Pigs. And I looked forward so much to reading it to my second-born child. Meh.
Oh
So I
no.
do understand a little bit how you might feel about somebody not enjoying Joyce as much as you do, because I, in a much dilute way, have experienced the same thing with my children.
Yeah, I think, I mean, we all have these books that are dear to us, you know what I mean? But
Mhm.
I think there's different ways of, I think if you're truly sort of like comfortable and understand why you love the book, then it doesn't hurt or it doesn't feel like a personal slight if someone doesn't have that same
Mhm.
experience of it,
Well,
you know?
it's like recommending, oh, I don't know, a television show or a restaurant.
Hmm.
You know, you
Yeah.
might hate it, but I like it. What do you mean by public scholarship, and how do you look at it? You
Hmm.
individual, you in particular.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so the reason that it's a public scholarship project is because I'm actually in a class about public scholarship.
Yes.
So I think I'm still very much so sort of asking myself, like, what is public scholarship? Why do we
Mhm.
do it? You know, what what does it do? And I think the best like definition of public scholarship that I've gotten so far is that it's a mutual relationship. So a lot of people think publics, or I think our first thoughts a lot of times when we imagine public scholarship is sort of, oh, I have all of this knowledge that I've gotten from the academy. Now let me share it with the public. And it sort of can often lead to this sort of like condescending or paternal feeling of like, I am the learned one, come listen to me. I will translate it for the plebeians, you know, like, and so we, like the first thing we talked about in that class is like, no, that's not correct. That's not the approach. It's about this give and take and thinking about how like scholars and also people who are aware or like who know these things, but maybe from like life experience or from different settings can learn from each other. And so I think why I set this project up as interviews is Joyce has that, and I think we've talked about that, is Joyce has this reputation of being sort of like so like confusing and so invested that you kind of, you know, you need to be a master's English student to have the time and the knowledge to be able to read this. And so I think there have already been a lot of projects, you know what I mean? And I think also a lot of attitude of we have to, you know, convince the masses that they need to read Ulysses, or we need to convince people that it's really not so bad. And so I think I just wanted to go the exact opposite route. I guess it's a little bit self-serving, but like focus on me learning from people who haven't studied Joyce and recognizing that you like, even just like having read the first 300 pages of Ulysses and hated it, like you know something about Ulysses that I don't, you know? So yeah, I think it's that balance.
So public scholarship does have a communal aspect to it then.
Very much so. I think the way it's being enacted right now, it has that aspect, but to me, from what I understand, it's supposed to be that's supposed to be the heart of it. It is this constant exchange and this realization that like the, you know, the gated academy is porous and is constantly getting knowledge from outside and is constantly sending its knowledge beyond its own walls.
I sort of see what you mean. Go back to Latin class. I mean, as you know, I waited 50 years to take Latin.
Yeah.
I could have done it on my own at any point in there. I could have even done it on my own instead of going to the classes at that time. I kind of needed to be there. And much as Bob, that's my husband, was learned and a scholar, he didn't have the community aspect of it, which was really unfortunate. So yeah, I see what you're saying now. Casaubon was not of the public scholarly mode.
No, I feel like that's a great definition, is public scholarship is just not being like Mr. Casaubon.
Yes, negative example there.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah. You can have it. You don't even need to footnote me.
Fantastic. I mean, I'd give you a footnote anyway, just for fun.
Oh, sure, go for it. Does public scholarship have to involve a product at the end?
Yeah, good question.
Well, think about it. I mean, you know, you are doing this. You will have a product at the end of this course. I'm not going to have a product at the end of book club, but I will know a little bit more than I did. There's absolutely nobody on the planet who I will be talking to other than book club about these books, except for maybe Ulysses. And I've already had the conversations with other people who've hated it. But there will be no product at the end. There will be no continued discourse on these things. So it sort of has a beginning and a middle and an end, but the end is more of a time thing rather than a this is the product thing.
And I think the way you said it like that, of like there's a beginning and a middle and the end is kind of there, but we don't notice it, I feel actually really reflects how I, in the like shift from bachelor's to master's, have been reading, where I used to sort of think, okay, Ulysses is 700 pages long. I am going to read those 700 pages and then they're finished and I have read Ulysses. Ta-da.
Yeah, that was my hope for me when I went into it, by the way.
So close. Only 400 to go then. Just
Yeah,
pick up where you
right.
live. But I think the more that I'm like talking to people about it, but also just even in my more like traditional scholarly work that I do, like it very much is like I had a beginning, which we talked about, you know, that's where it started. And I'm in the middle, and I kind of feel like I'm just gonna be in the middle for the rest of my
And
time, you
isn't
know?
that wonderful?
Yeah, it's true.
That's sort of how I feel about my yard and my garden. It's not super
Ah,
fancy, but I just gardened like a crazy woman last summer. And people say, well, why are you still planting trees? I mean, by tree, I mean, a 15-inch stick. It will not
ah.
be a tree in my lifetime. That is not the point.
Mhm.
That product of a 40-foot tree is not the point of planting trees, of being scholarly,
Mhm.
small s, about trees.
Mhm.
It's the joy of the tree planting. It's, I guess for you, it's the joy of the reading and the thinking and the studying.
Ah,
I think you would be eventually might be just as content even if you could read and talk to a few people rather than producing something. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't
that's
know.
true.
You've got a few years to
No.
go before you get to that stage.
Yeah, we'll think about that. No, but I feel like I hadn't put it together like that before, and the tree metaphor is fantastic.
Oh, well.
But but yeah, I don't know. I think that it is, and I think public scholarship too is in part sort of alleviates that feeling of, you know, that whole like publish or perish, you know,
Mhm,
experience of no, you're only reading Ulysses or whatever. You're only
mhm.
reading Ulysses so that you can publish something about it. No, like I'm reading Ulysses so that I can have conversations about it. And I'm reading Ulysses so I can have my own opinion of Joyce to
Mhm,
tell to other people, but also to let other people shape and change as we go. And
mhm.
that's enough. It's not, it's like not even that's an end into itself, but sometimes it's just means, and there doesn't have to be an end. Like that's
I
okay.
think you've just defended next year's project without having written it yet.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes,
Won't have
exactly.
to, when I get up there in front of my panel, I'll just be like, well, actually, we've already discussed it. And that's what literary studies are all about.
Sure. Oh, yeah. There you are. Done.
So done. Goodbye. Walk out.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, I love that. Is there any other thing? I'll just like open the floor. Anything that you wanted to bring up or say about Joyce or question?
Well, I do have a little ironic tidbit here.
Amazing.
Today is my husband's birthday.
Is it really?
Yes.
That's
Isn't that something
fantastic.
to be discussing Bloomsday
Honestly.
on the
And
birthday of he who was a huge fan?
that's why. And it's only, I didn't know that was his birthday, only 6 days after Joyce's birthday.
Yes.
So wow, what a
Fellow
party.
Aquarians, indeed. They're a strange lot, those Aquarians.
Yeah, I feel like honestly might explain a lot about Joyce.
Oh, as far as
But
I'm concerned, I mean, Bob and Joyce definitely had an affinity for each other.
wow.
Bob did a lot of theater, and
Wow.
he had a woolen suit that he wore for auditions. And we in the family, and he himself just called it his Irish suit.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it was brown tweed and itchy, and as far as
I
I'm concerned,
love
Bloom
that.
looks like my husband did probably 50 years ago. How are you ever going to synthesize this data? I'd
Yeah.
love to read your final project on this
Well,
course.
I think here's the interesting thing is that actually speaking of like having an end product and that sort of thing, what I'm thinking of doing instead of, you know, making a narrative or a write up or, you know, editing all of these videos together, I was thinking instead of posting them as episodes where it's just like almost like a talk show, like each episode is me talking to a different person, kind of with like this feeling that we don't have to, but also can't synthesize 20 or 30 people's thoughts about Joyce. It's just here they are.
He doesn't lend himself to that. I mean, even if you took
Yeah.
you listen to all, say, 15 interviews, make notes, find, I don't know, 6 distinctive themes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
It's still going to be a stinker of a job editing that. Theme number 1, Ulysses says abstract art,
Mm-hmm.
whatever. Synthesizing 15 people's data, or 6 of the 15 people who commented on that just sounds
Yeah,
painful.
exactly. And I think
Very Joycean, though.
it does. I know. But I don't know. I think I am focusing or thinking of it as like painful. For me, it's not really something I want to do, but also I think it would do a disservice, implying that, oh yes, through all of these conversations I had with people, I am a scholar, therefore I can find these through lines and make it make sense. No, I can't. Like nothing, nobody in any of these interviews had says, like from what I can tell, like there have been through lines, like the whole, like Joyce the man, Joyce the work, Joyce the experiences, like a lot of people vibe with that. Um, there have been discussions about Joyce's Catholicism that, come up with people being able to contextualize Joyce sort of with his contemporary authors, that sort of thing. But those
Mhm.
are all so broad. That's not anything that, you know what I mean? I didn't have any moment of like, look at this pattern. All of these people see this one
Mhm.
common thing in Joyce, and that is the core of what his work means. No, like there's nothing like that. And I think that it would be better to celebrate that and show that this was like a process of multiple conversations rather than trying to pretend that it's
Mhm.
anything that can come to one conclusion.
But there is something so moving about Joyce and Ulysses in particular, that
Mm-hmm.
so many people want to read it and want to talk about it. I
Mm-hmm.
find that quite fascinating, and I'm part of this little teeny part of this discourse as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't have much to say other than I don't like it, and my husband loved it. I mean, that's basically what my thoughts boil down to. But I'm finding it fascinating to have such a strong reaction, even if it's negative, and other people are uh, so enthusiastic about sharing their thoughts about it.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty cool.
What was the most memorable for you about this conversation? And what will you take from it?
The most memorable part was observing your passion and enthusiasm. And I liked discussing what is public scholarship.
Okay.
I mean, I don't really think scholarship is looking things up on the internet, but I have friends who say, Annabel, look this up for me. You can always find the answer. That's not exactly public scholarship, but it might be scholarship writ real small.
Mm-hmm.
So the whole idea of scholarship and studying, I mean, my kids have pointed out that I'm turning into their father, which is not a bad thing, but just the whole idea of studying stuff and learning stuff. And I have really learned through Latin and book club that having
Mm-hmm.
people to talk to about it or to listen to other people talk about it is really, it's the salt that adds the flavor to the experience.